What's up, everybody? Happy Saturday to you, our day of rest. Check out my video earlier. But I wanted to do a live stream, because I've been running around my house just like doing things and just, obviously I'm a habitual thinker. And so I was just kind of pondering over just like my life, you know what I mean? And just like certain things and you know just the journey of my life, if you will. And so if you've been following this content, you know that I'm adopted, right? You all know that I'm adopted. And I lost my biological mother in 2023, and then I lost my adoptive mother this year in March. And, my relationship with my adoptive mother was pretty interesting. I had a lot of respect for her. I definitely revered her. I was appreciative of her because, I always acknowledge that, she did not have to do what she did for me and my siblings, during that time of her life. She was retired. She could have, her husband had passed away. She was pretty well off, and she could have used her fortune and used her money in all kinds of ways. But she, decided that, her rationality for getting foster kids was that she did not want to be alone. And so that is what we were always taught, that we were there because she had lost her husband, and she, didn't want to live in that house by herself. She didn't want to be alone. And I understood that rationality, even though, by all, in reality, I would say my mom, she wasn't alone. She actually did have her own daughter, her own biological daughter, and she also had grandkids. And when we were foster kids, it was more like we knew that her biological daughter and her grandkids did not like us. Like, her grandkids were older than us, or they actually were around the same age as us, right? And so this is our programming, is that, she's jealous of you. She doesn't want me to have you guys. And so my mom was very intentional about separating us, the foster kids or the adopted kids eventually, from her biological daughter and her grandkids. And so, outside looking in, it always appeared as though her biological daughter and her grandkids were always having beef about us or about her money. And, you know, again, when you're a kid, you can only believe what is being told to you, what you see before your eyes. Even though you see things are being said, you don't understand what they mean. All right. So fast forward, my mom passes away. My adoptive mom passes away this year. And what's going on, Asha? I see you. And I have to talk to her biological daughter more than I've ever had to talk to this woman in my life. Now, mind you, I have been programmed that this woman is jealous of me, she hates me. And to come to find out, those things were true. But I understood the root of them. And it wasn't until after my mom died and I kind of started hearing things and hearing her perspective of things that I realized that, you know, everybody gets foster kids for different reasons. And I can definitely understand my mom not wanting to be alone in her house. But what I didn't understand is that her daughter was significantly lower intelligent in a lot of degrees. She wasn't very self sufficient. And she almost came off as a dependent. My mom was a career mover, career shaker, very powerhouse woman. And, I feel like she was almost ashamed of how her daughter kind of turned out. Um, and I think maybe she didn't really understand what her own accountabilities were for why her daughter maybe turned out the way that she did. Um, but you know, I say this to say that today, well, I wouldn't say even today, but like recently, I realized that, you know, our that my mom, that she adopted us, maybe out of good feeling, maybe out of, good intent, that she was doing something right. But she also, in doing something right, she was weaponizing that thing that she was doing right against her own flesh. And so even now, when all is settled, my mom always bred us, she always said to me, when I die, I'm not leaving my kids anything. When I die, I'm not leaving my kids anything. And so that's kind of what I had in my brain. Like when she dies, she's going to do whatever she wants to do with her money. Who cares? Right. When you tell me that so many times, I really don't give a fuck about your money. I'm not thinking about inheritance. At this point, you have weaponized your money to the point where I disdain your money. I don't have any attachment to your money. And my mom was very good about weaponizing her money to control like what you did. And if you don't do, then it's like she'll have you out there struggling, whatever. It don't matter if you're not conforming to how she wants you to be. And I say this to say that I realize that as much as, we were a fulfillment to my mom, we were also a weaponization. And, I feel, me personally, because her daughter, she doesn't have the disdain for my younger siblings like she has for me. And I realized that, by just by things that she has said, post my mom dying, that the disdain is targeted towards me because my mom has always weaponized me, particularly with her. Like she's she would say things like we would have a normal conversation and she would bring me up and start bragging on me. And mind you, half of the shit that my mom was bragging behind my back, to her and other people, she would never say it to my face. In my opinion, I was not living my life according to her standards. So it's kind of crazy to hear how people talk about you, you know, behind your back, and versus what they say, what they kind of project as a belief to you in your face. And so, like to this day, like I was talking to a cousin and she was saying how this woman continues to talk about me. And I'm like, I don't really get it, because getting back to the inheritance, my mom lied. She lied. Like when she said, I'm not going to leave any of my kids anything, she should have just been specific to the foster kids, to the adoptive kids, because at the end of the day, she left everything to her biological daughter. And you would think that should be cut and dry in. You got everything. Your biggest fear of your mom adopting these kids and actually leaving them something, it's gone. So why are you still bitter? Why are you still on this rant talking about your adoptive sister? Like, I realize no matter, what perception of a win a person can have, when they have deep seated psychological resentment for somebody, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Like, and I say this to say that my mom weaponized me against this woman so bad. And I think the reason why she resents me so much is that I got the best of my mom. Like my mom literally bred her perfect kid with another woman's child. Like that's what she chose to do. Like, you obviously my biological flesh, you're a failure. I don't I'll do as much as I can, but I need to breed my perfect kid so that I can have brag points. And I think that's what my mom did. And I think, in retrospect, I was just sitting around operating like, these are the right things to do. This is the right way to live my life. And I just made good decisions, you know. And again, my mom was very proud of me, and I felt that. But I didn't realize how much she was weaponizing, you know, what she felt like she created against her own child. And so it's just, hindsight is 2020. I love my mom. I am grateful for the version of her that I had, but it is, real life that two people can have the same parent and have totally different realities of that parent, have totally different experiences with that parent. Like, I feel like my mom's biological daughter and I were raised by the same woman, same fleshly woman, but a different woman, if that makes sense. Um, What's going on? Oh, hold up. We gotta get. What did you, Justin? You gotta get out of here. Hold on. Let me go ahead and block this person. Who are you? Just crazy. If you don't get your ugly, insecure ass off my fucking channel, hold on. You better be glad my moderators aren't here because they would definitely embarrass. Like, people really think that because you're kind of sharing a vulnerable perspective that the sniper in you won't come out. Bitch, don't come on my channel doing that weird shit. Like, seriously, like, damn, this is why I don't look at my comments. Because like when I'm on a thought, you know what I mean? I look down at these comments and I see some old ugly rat face ass ignorant just saying shit, right? It kind of throws you off. And then when I get in there, it's like, damn, I gotta turn off my vulnerable and turn on my viper. Get the fuck out of here with that shit. Like, seriously, this is why I do not read my comments. Because I'll be like, cool, cool, cool. He's like, wait, can you be quiet? Like, can you get the fuck off my channel? What is it? Azana? You look, that sounds like a Zionist name. Y'all just want to say shit just to say shit. Get the fuck out of here. It's always these folks that look like they from that bloodline of evil on that dumbass shit. Get the fuck off my line. But anyways, getting back to the live stream though, for those of people who were adopted, like, did you like grow up feeling like you were a part of something but then you weren't a part of something? Because I that's how I feel. Like, I've always had this disassociation from my adoptive family. Like, and it wasn't just the fact that they weren't mine. It just I felt like an outcaster to them. You know what I mean? And some people will say that adopted kids are ungrateful, like they don't have a right to feel the way that they feel. And a lot of people disconnect how adoptive kids feel. Like, when you're adopted from a baby, that's a whole different ball game than when you're adopted into a family and you're an older kid, right? Because the people in that family, they did not get to see you kind of grow up from that cute little infant into this kid that you are, right? They just see you as the kid, right? So there's no real connection, right? And at that point, they can either establish the connection as a kid that you are, or you know and how you evolve, or they can set in their mind this image of this kid. And so for me, I've always felt like we were the foster kids. We were the kids that my mom was helping. And to be honest with you, I felt like we were kind of puppets in a way, like little baby dolls. Like, she was older in her life, and so I felt like it was a way for her to have some sense of validation as an older woman too, having younger kids. It kind of made her look younger. But I can see the psychology of everything. And I think that one thing that people who, adopt kids who are a little bit older, they need to kind of understand what their full intent is, right? And what the full premise is, right? Because when you are running on a premise that later on is not going to make sense to reality, it's going to make people question, overall the whole intent of why you did what you did. And so, like it's crazy because, like I said, I respect and I'm very grateful for what my mom did for me and my siblings. But, as I continue to analyze her premise of doing it because she didn't want to be alone and she had a whole struggling daughter and granddaughter, and grandkids out in the galaxy that needed her help and could have benefited from her help more than some kids that weren't even related. It does start to kind of make me just, look at things like a little bit differently. And you know it's sad, but I think like my reconciliation to my adoptive mom passing and just how everything played out is that, I was looking at her as a mother and she was just looking at me as a kid that she was raising. You know what I mean? But not necessarily her daughter. And even that rivalry with her and her daughter and stuff like that, it was all intentional. Like my mom literally created that rift between us intentionally to keep us separate. And I think it's just because she wanted to operate with an illusion, a story of things that really her biological daughter knew the truth of. And she was working very hard to make sure that we never connected. But I think like she created a monster in her biological daughter because the day we found out my mom passed on, she was talking shit about you. You would have thought that she did not lose a mother, that she had lost a mortal enemy. And she did everything she could, like in that funeral planning process, to tell me every negative thing about our mom that she felt like I should have known. Right. And, obviously I was processing some of that. And, I was resentful, angry with her that she was telling me those things during that time, and I really couldn't calculate her full intent of telling me all those negative things. It's like, hey, this woman is dead. You know what I mean? Why the fuck is you saying all this stuff, now? But I think in retrospect, she was trying to seize an opportunity to tell me like her side of the reality of the story. And, again, when I see a broader side of the story, it is really sad. It's really sad. And so I would say if you have biological kids or whatever, and whatever you got going on with them, don't bring foster kids in that mix. Um, don't go out and get foster kids just to weaponize them against your biological kids because again at the end of the day, it's like a righteous act can turn into something very unrighteous very quickly. And like for me, that very quickly came like recently, like as I'm assessing, my mom and her daughter's dynamic versus me. I'm like, damn, I was a weapon in all of that bullshit. Like me and my siblings were a weapon in all that bullshit, and it's almost like I felt like in a way it was almost a witching because there was so much evil spirited stuff going on in the dynamics of these relationships over the years. So, I say this to say that, as an adopted individual, I have I have come to realize that people do things for all kinds of reasons, and sometimes it may seem like it's coming from a good place, but in the broader scheme of things, sometimes it could be coming from a place of just using people who are vulnerable to against somebody else who is vulnerable. And I think that's the sad thing about certain human dynamics. on this earth is that people weaponize vulnerable people. And I think what my what my adopted mom resented is that like I wasn't vulnerable all my life. That I was definitely empowered with a different spirit where she was bullying her biological daughter and I would not tolerate that. And even her biological daughter said, like, one time we were all in the car and she was like, mom said something and you were like, no, we're gonna do this because it makes more sense. And mom was like, oh, okay, Angie, or whatever. She said, do you know if I would have said that to her, I would have never stopped hearing it. And it's just apparent that, you know, she definitely bullied her daughter because she knew she was weak, and she knew, and I think she tried it with me, but I was just cut from a different cloth. I don't come from your bloodlines. My bloodlines do not tolerate bullying. We take care of them right away. We set tones, and I think that's why my mom ended up respecting me more than she respected her daughter. At the end of the day, and my mom knew she didn't have to worry about me, because I didn't ask her for any money. I never asked her for anything. I understood that asking her for money was like servitude. And so, yeah, I guess this is the chronicles of an adopted person. I do think though that people, no matter what has happened in your life, I think that just analyzing it, reconciling it, moving on, or whatever, you know, honestly, I accept that, I might have been weaponized against a vulnerable person, you know, and now that vulnerable person hates me, and I've done nothing to that person. I've done nothing to that person. I mind my business. I don't wish ill upon people except for the wicked, right? And this person cannot stop talking about me. And like my whole thing is, this is beyond me at this point with my mom's biological daughter because it's like you got everything and you're still bitter. And to me that needs to be analyzed. Like why are you still bitter? And one of my cousins did tell me recently that she said to her that the reason why she's so upset is that she hates the fact that her own fleshly mother loved another woman's daughter more than she loved her, and that she poured into another woman's daughter more than she poured into her. And, again, I am very fortunate for what my mom did for me, you know, but I can't say that it was my fault. You know what I mean? And I think the rationality in the situation for me is that hopefully her therapist can help her to reason that your hate is in the wrong place. Like you shouldn't be hating your sister. You really should be hating you really should be reconciling the resentment towards the person that made your sister or helped build your sister. You know what I mean? And I think that's a resolution for her. So anybody dealing with a situation like that, that is your resolution, is make sure that you understand where your feelings are directed. You know what I mean? I search on YouTube how my dream girl looks like and it shows your live stream. That is so funny. One would say I'm a beautiful nightmare, if you will. I don't know if I'm really a dream girl or not. Maybe a beautiful nightmare. But let me know what you guys think about that because I psychoanalyze everything. It's just kind of an innate thing that's in me. And just kind of looking at my own personal situation here. And I'm just like, you know, and I think the real thing is like, too, is like my family is the tribe that I create. So like my siblings, I'm very close to mine. So I don't feel like I don't have a family, you know? And even down to just parental, like do I feel like I had a mom or dad? I had a mom. I have a dad that is, in my life, and he's a good guy. Um he's my biological dad, and I reconnected with him when I was 21. And my biological dad is a lot like me. He didn't force a relationship with me or anything like that. I reconnected with both of my biological parents when I was 21, and that was a weird thing for my mom as well, because she encouraged me to get to know them, to search for them, get to know them. And then when that happened, she was jealous, and she had me basically reaffirming my allegiance to her. And like one of the things that she would constantly do is, like, I would call my biological mom by her first name, and she would just keep focusing on, why aren't you calling her mom? Why don't you call her mom? And it's like, mom, I'm like, you're my mom, right? You raised me, you helped me to become the woman that I am. Like, you're my mom. I'm not going to give that title to anybody else, even if I was born of her. And my biological mom respected it. She understood it, but my adoptive mom just kept focusing on it as if it was like a loyalty test or something. You know what I mean? And and I realized that, like, with adoptive parents, right? They will encourage you to establish a relationship with your biological family or and whatever, and then they'll be totally jealous about it. They'll be totally betrayed by it, you know and especially if it's like you actually have the relationship with the person, and it becomes like a psychological mind fuck of loyalty, if you will. And so, yeah, that is just my experience being an adopted person. And you know I appreciate the opportunity to have a chance at a better life. But life was always going to be what I made it, right? The opportunity is just the door, the platform, right? You still got to make it, right? And so, you know I think that God put me in my mom's house, for a couple of reasons. I think that number one, she was tethered to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. She was tethered to a faith that was very much study based. And it just led me to knowing the God of my people more. Not her religion, but just the God of my people. And it sent me on a right journey to understand how to study and understand, my people, and that's it, and so I'm grateful. Even with my mom having her little stank little ways or whatever, I'm still grateful. I'm still going to honor her, and I'm going to pray for her biological daughter, that she reconciles some of that bullying and trauma that she did experience. um because I don't like people suffering. I'm not the soul that, you know, relishes in people just being miserable. That's not in my nature to like to see humans suffering unless they're wicked humans. And then I take great delight in that. I do. It's a guilty pleasure. But anyways, you guys, have a wonderful rest of your day. If you're adopted, I would love to kind of understand like your stories. Like, did you feel embraced? Did you feel like this black sheep or this outcast? Do you feel like you were being weaponized against some biological family member? Let me know, and I will catch you guys on the next one.